Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Kausha, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled A-N-D, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. This past summer, I was inspired 2 days in a row to drive a 90-minute distance one way, so 180 minutes round trip to a Connecticut beach at the ocean. There's a very large beach in Connecticut where they have actually 4 beaches there. It's so large, 4 large parking lots and 4 separate beaches. And so I was inspired 2 days in a row to go, and I was pretty clear that God inspired me. He wanted me to go and hand out cards about the 2 books that I wrote for him that helps people understand they can talk to God and they can hear God. And again, the title of both books is the same. It's just book 1 and book 2. And the title is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. So I went to the beach and began to hand out cards. But before I got to that point, handing out cards, let me explain that because there are 4 beaches, when I arrived to enter into the park area, I asked Jesus which beach I should go to, which of the 4 beaches. And I was inspired to go to beach number 3, so number 3 out of 4. And it's important that I note this because of the things that happened during this particular day, because I had gone to beach number 3. If I went to a different beach, the following things would not have happened. And so when I got to the first beach and I started to hand out cards, the very first person I approached, I was inspired. I asked which person to go to first. I always ask when I'm passing out cards, I ask God to inspire me who to go to, who not to go to, what kinds of things to say. So I'm constantly talking to him during the whole process while I'm handing out cards and what do I say to each person. And I'm always amazed because depending on the people you're talking to, some things work better than other things, and some people don't want to talk about certain topics. So by asking Jesus what to say, what topic, and who to see first, etc., and how to explain certain things. You can explain things in different ways, but by asking him, I get the ideas in my mind on how to do that. And as you'll be hearing in a moment, with great success, great evidence, coincidences that prove that I'm saying the right thing. And I'm saying the right thing, not because I came up with it, but because I asked God what to do, and he put the right idea into my head. So the very first person I walk up to, because I was inspired to go there first and hand them a card, was a woman who just totally amazed me. I handed her the card. She said, well, what's the book about? So I gave her a general outline of what the book was about. And she said, wow, this is pretty amazing. She said, I have to tell you, I've been experiencing things like that. And then she began to talk, and I was inspired to just be quiet and listen to her. And she went on for about 5 or 6 minutes, telling me the things in her life that totally amaze her. Like she sees numbers. Often she'll see numbers, and she'll see the same number 2 or 3 times in one day, and it'll mean certain things at the end of the day. Like she might see 555, and then at the end of the day, at exactly 5:55, some miraculous thing happens. Or she'll see the number 222, and at 2:22 on that day, something happens. So she's very much into numbers, and as you know, if you've been listening to me in prior shows, so am I. Then she started telling me about coincidences. Very often, she'll see that someone with a certain name comes by and talks to her, then they go away. They finish their discussion, and another person comes by and starts talking to her. It turns out they have the same name, same first name, and then later that day another person comes by and same first name again. Well, I have those coincidences too. And then she talks about how she notices that she gets ideas popping into her head often, and she knows that the ideas popping into her head are from God, she told me. And then I explained to her, I couldn't resist telling her, I said that's why they call the word ideo, because deo is the Latin word for God. I can't resist telling everybody that, by the way. So it really is remarkable. If you haven't heard this before, the word deo is the Latin word for God. So when they formed that word and said, I got an idea, an ideo, whoever formed that word was trying to tell everybody that it was God who just put an idea into their head. It was God talking to them. So the word idea, means the same thing as an inspiration, and an inspiration is something coming into you from the Spirit of God. So when you get an idea or you get an inspiration, it's God talking to you. And then what you have to do is talk back to him. Well, I'm stressing all this because she knew all that. She was telling me that in her life, she was inspired by God and taught these things. What she knows about numbers, she was taught by God. What she knows about ideas, she was taught by God. And what she knows about coincidences being from God, she learned that from God. So remarkably, her life story was very much like mine. She was younger than me, so she's experienced this for about 20 years now. And she was evangelizing me. She was telling me things, trying to convince me that, God speaks to me too. And she was encouraged by, she said, your books sound like it covers these topics. So we had a wonderful discussion. It was so amazing because the person sitting on the blanket next to her was soaking it all up and was inspired by listening to the other person. Could hear both of us talking. So when I finished, as I was walking by the other person, I was inspired to just walk by them. They stopped me and they said, excuse me, but I'd like to talk to you about your book as well. And I had a few books with me that day, and I just gave the prior woman a book, a signed copy, so she wanted a signed copy too, the second woman. And so there were 2 people now evangelized and who got our book now. Just because I went to the right beach that God told me to go to. I met a person so that the second person heard that there were 2 people like us who had the same kind of a life. That really blew that second person away. Pretty amazing. So throughout the rest of the day, I was there about 4 hours at this beach. I go from blanket to blanket down along this seashore. I go where I'm inspired to go, who to talk to, and say what I'm led to say. And I averaged about 20 people over that 4 hours, and I guess that works out to an average of about 12 minutes per blanket. And sometimes there's 4 or 5 people at each blanket because there's families. And it was a remarkable day, and I often get great clues that I was at the right beach and talking to the right people and saying the right thing. because I would, be saying something. I'd be inspired by God to say a certain thing. And as the story came into my mind of what I should say, and I started to say it, I would say something that just popped into my mind. Like, I'd say, for example, supposing your husband Roger was here, and the woman stops me and says, "How did you know my husband's name was Roger?" Or I'm saying something else, and I'll say something like, supposing you bought a Dodge instead of a Ford because your brother bought a Ford, and somebody says, "Well, how did you know that?" That's exactly what happened. Just this last week, I bought a Dodge, and my brother had purchased a Ford. And so I was getting a lot of people saying to me on this particular day, at this particular beach, "How did you know that?" Well, and I explained to them, ideas are things that come into our mind from God. And when you're doing what I'm doing, telling people about God, and you ask God what to say, often God gives you the words to say that are remarkably precise. And this was happening to people as I was talking. So that convinced them that at least I was being inspired by God, I think, in a few cases anyway, and inspired them also that our books, the two books titled Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles, must have been inspired by God, and I hope that was convincing them. I feel in my spirit and my soul that that's what God was up to. He wanted to convince the listeners about me and the books that I had written, because, as you may know, if you've been listening for prior weeks, I was inspired very clearly with several coincidence miracles that God wanted me to write the two books that I did write. And if you read the books, you'll find Exhibit E. It's Exhibit E like for Edward. In both books, there's an Exhibit E, and in both books proves that God wanted me to write those two books. There's remarkable factors that happened while I was writing each book, and God told me to write them down and put them in the book so everybody who reads the books will know that He did inspire them. Well, at the end of the day, I was pretty tired. 4 hours of doing this, repeating over and over 20 times the same kind of script, basic kind of script. So I was tired, and I found that I had walked about a quarter of a mile down the beach, and now I had to walk a quarter mile back to get to my car. So I began to walk back. And at the very end, as I was about to go through the exit gate, I saw a young woman about 24 years old. She had a baby with her that looked to be about 2 years old. So I was inspired to give her a card, tell her about the book, one last person before I left for the day. And as I usually do, I asked her if she had any miracles she could share with me from her life. And she said, "I have one I think is pretty impactful. You might appreciate." She knew that I was going to put it on my radio show. She said, "I'm a twin. My sister passed away recently, and on our birthday, I was driving down the highway, and I was missing her very much because we always had wonderful birthday celebrations together, and now I was alone for the first time. And I was driving down the highway at 65 miles an hour, and the car in front of me hit a brown bag. I saw the bag in front of the car, and when they hit the brown bag, a balloon came out of it, and the balloon went up into the sky and then suddenly stuck to the back of their car, the rear window in their car. And I was amazed by that. Why would a balloon stop and stick to the car, to the back of the car that was in front of me? And the writing on the balloon said, "Happy Birthday." And she said, "I'm extremely confident that that was God in heaven and my sister in heaven sending me a gift on my birthday because they knew how sad I was." Really a remarkable story, and I believe it myself, truly a remarkable story. So I'm so glad I stopped at that last person. And this is what I mean about following God's inspirations. God wanted me to speak to that one last person. I've always been blessed by following the ideas that God pops into my head. I don't think I've ever gotten an idea from God that turned out not to be miraculous. God bless you all. I'll talk to you next week.